Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Chapter 63, Esther's Narrative. Soon after I had had that conversation with my guardian, he put a sealed paper in my hand one morning and said, "This is for next month, my dear." I found in it £200. I began very quietly to make such preparations as I thought were necessary, regulating my purchases by my guardian's taste, which I knew very well, of course. I arranged my wardrobe to please him, and hoped I should be highly successful. I did it all so quietly because I was not quite free from my old apprehension that Ada would be rather sorry, and because my guardian was so quiet himself, I had no doubt that under all the circumstances we should be married in the most private and simple manner. The only exception I made was Mrs. Woodcourt. I told her that I was going to be married to my guardian, and that we had been engaged some time. She highly approved. She could never do enough for me, and was remarkably softened now, in comparison with what she had been when we first knew her. There was no trouble she would have not taken to have been of use to me, but I need hardly say that I only allowed her to take as little as gratified her kindness without asking it. Of course this was not a time to neglect my guardian, and of course this was not a time for neglecting my darling, so I had plenty of occupation, which I was glad of. Meanwhile, I must say I could not agree with my guardian on the subject of the will, and I had some sanguine hopes of Jarndyce and Jarndyce. Which of us was right will soon appear, but I certainly did encourage expectations. In Richard, the discovery gave occasion for a burst of business and agitation that buoyed him up for a little time, but he had lost the elasticity of hope now, and seemed to me to retain only its feverish anxieties. From something my guardian said one day when we were talking about this, I understood that my marriage would not take place until after the term time we had been told to look forward to, and I thought the more for that how rejoiced I should be if I could be married when Richard and Ada were a little more prosperous. The term was very near indeed when my guardian was called out of town and went down to Yorkshire on Mr. Woodcourt's business. He had told me beforehand that his presence there would be necessary. I had just come in one night from my dear girl's when a letter from my guardian was brought to me. It asked me to join him in the country, and mentioned by what stagecoach my place was taken, and at what time in the morning I should have to leave town. It added in a postscript that I would not be many hours from Ada. I set off as appointed early next morning. I travelled all day, wondering all day what I could be wanted for at such a distance now. I thought it might be for this purpose, and now I thought it might be for that purpose, but I was never, never, never near the truth. It was night when I came to my journey's end, and found my guardian waiting for me. This was a great relief, and toward evening I had begun to fear that he might be ill. However, there he was, as well as it was possible to be, and when I saw his genial face again at its brightest and best, I said to myself, "He has been doing some other great kindness." Supper was ready at the hotel, and when we were alone at table, he said, "Full of curiosity, no doubt, little woman, to know why I have brought you here?" "Well, guardian," said I, "without thinking myself a Fatima, and you a Bluebeard, I am a little curious about it." "Then, to ensure your night's rest, my love," he returned gaily, "I won't wait until tomorrow to tell you. I have very much wished to express to Woodcourt somehow my sense of his humanity to poor unfortunate Joe, his inestimable services to my young cousins, and his value to us all. When it was decided that he should settle here, it came into my head that I might ask his acceptance of some unpretending and suitable little place to lay his own head in. I therefore caused such a place to be looked for, and such a place was found on very easy terms, and I have been touching it up for him and making it habitable. However, when I walked over it the day before yesterday, and it was reported ready, I found that I was not housekeeper enough to know whether things were all as they ought to be. So I sent off for the best little housekeeper that could possibly be got, to come and give me her advice. And here she is," said my guardian, laughing and crying both together. Because he was so dear, so good, so admirable, I tried to tell him what I thought of him, but I could not articulate a word. "Tut, tut," said my guardian, "you make too much of it, little woman. Why, how you sobbed, Dame Durden, how you sob! It is with exquisite pleasure, guardian, with a heart full of thanks. Well, well, he said, I am delighted that you approve. I thought you would. I meant it to be as pleasant a surprise for the little mistress of Bleak House. I kissed him and dried my eyes. I know now, said I have seen this in your face a long while. No, have you really, my dear? Said he. What a Dame Durden it is to read a face. He was so quaintly cheerful that I could not long be otherwise, and was almost ashamed of having been otherwise at all. When I went to bed, I cried. I am bound to confess that I cried, but I hope it was with pleasure, though I am not quite sure it was with pleasure. I repeated every word of the letter twice over. A most beautiful summer morning succeeded, and after breakfast we went out, arm in arm, to see the house of which I was to give my mighty housekeeping opinion. We entered a flower garden by a gate, in a side wall of which he had a key, and the first thing I saw was that the beds of flowers were all laid out according to the manner of my beds of flowers at home. You see, my dear, observed my guardian, standing still with a delighted face to watch my looks. Knowing there could be no better plan, I borrowed yours. We went on by a pretty little orchard, where the cherries were nestling among the green leaves, and the shadows of the apple trees were sporting on the grass, to the house itself, a cottage quite a rustic cottage of dolls' rooms, but such a lovely place, so tranquil and so beautiful, with such a rich and smiling country spread about it, with water sparkling away in the distance, here all overhung with summer growth, there turning a humming mill, and still, as we went through the pretty rooms, out at the little rustic veranda doors, and underneath the little wooden colonnades, garlanded with woodbine, jasmine, and honeysuckle, I saw in the papering on the walls, in the colors of the furniture, in the arrangement of all the pretty objects, my little tastes and fancies, my little methods and inventions, which they used to laugh at while they praised them, my odd ways everywhere. I could not say enough in admiration of what was all so beautiful, but one secret doubt arose in my mind when I saw this. I thought, oh, would he be the happier for it? Would it not have been better for his peace that I should not have been so brought before him? Because, although I was not what he thought me, still he loved me very dearly, and it might remind him mournfully of what he believed he had lost. And now, little woman, said my guardian, whom I had never seen so proud and joyful as in showing me these things and watching my appreciation of them, now, last it all, for the name of this house. What is it called, my guardian? What is it called, dear guardian? My child, said he, come and see. He took me to the porch, which he had hitherto avoided, and said, pausing before he went out, my dear child, don't you guess the name? No, said I. We went out on the porch, and he showed me, written over it, Bleak House. He led me to a seat among the leaves close by. Sitting down beside me and taking my hand, he spoke to me thus. My darling girl, in what there had been between us, I have, I hope, been really solicitous for your happiness. When I wrote you the letter to which you brought the answer, I had my own too much in view, but I had yours. Whether under different circumstances I might ever have renewed my old dream, I sometimes dreamed, when you were very young, of making you my wife one day. I need not ask myself. I did renew it. I wrote my letter, and you brought your answer. I was cold, and I trembled violently, but not a word he uttered. I was cold, and I trembled violently, but not a word he uttered was lost. As I sat looking fixedly at him, and the sun's rays descended softly, shining through the leaves upon his bare head, I felt as if the brightness on him must be like the brightness of the angels. Hear me, my love, but do not speak. It is for me to speak now. When it was that I began to doubt whether what I had done was really would really make you happy is no matter. Woodcourt came home, and I soon had no doubt at all. I clasped him round the neck and hung my head upon his breast and wept. Lie lightly, confidently here, my child, said he, pressing me gently to him. I am your guardian and your father now. Rest confidently here. Understand me, my dear girl. I had no doubt of your being contented and happy, with me being so dutiful and devoted, but I saw with whom you would be happier. That I penetrated his secret when Dame Durden was blind. It is no wonder, for I knew the good that could never change in her better far than she did. Well, I have long been in Alan Woodcourt's confidence, although he was not until yesterday, a few hours before you came here, in mine. But I would not have my Esther's bright example lost. I would not have a jot of my dear girl's virtues unobserved and unhonoured. I would not have her admitted on the sufferance into the line of Morgan ap Kerrig. No, not for the weight of gold in all the mountains in Wales. He stopped to kiss me on the forehead, and I sobbed and wept afresh. Hush, little woman, don't cry. This is to be a day of joy. I have looked forward to it, he said exultantly. For months and months, a few words more, Dame Trot. I have said my say, determined not to throw away any atom of my Esther's worth. I took Mrs. Woodcourt into a separate confidence. Now, madam, said I clearly perceive that indeed I know to boot that your son loves my ward. I am further very sure that my ward loves your son, but will sacrifice her love to a sense of duty and affection, and will sacrifice it so completely, so entirely, so religiously, that you should never suspect it, though you watched her night and day. Then I told her all our story, ours, yours, and mine. Now, madam, said I, come you knowing this, and live with us. Come you and see my child from hour to hour. Set what you see against her pedigree, which is this, and this, for I scorned to mince it, and tell me what is the true legitimacy, when you shall have quite made up your mind on that subject. Why, honour to her, old Welsh blood, my dear, cried my guardian with enthusiasm. I believe the heart it animates beats no less warmly, no less admiringly, no less lovingly toward Dame Durden than my own. He tenderly raised my head as I clung to him, kissed me in his old fatherly way again and again. One more last word. When Alan Woodcourt spoke to you, my dear, he spoke with my knowledge and consent, but I gave him no encouragement, not I, for these surprises were my great reward, and I was too miserly to part with a scrap of it. He was to come and tell me all that passed, and he did. I have no more to say, my dearest. Alan Woodcourt stood beside your father when he lay dead, stood beside your mother. This is a Bleak house. This day I give this house his little mistress, and before God it is the brightest day in all my life. He rose and raised me with him. We were no longer alone. My husband, I have called him by that name full 7 happy years now, stood at my side. Alan, said my guardian, take from me a willing gift, the best wife that ever man had. What more can I say for you than that I know you deserve her? Take with her the little home she brings you. You know what she will make it. Alan, you know what she has made its namesake. Let me share its felicity sometimes. And what do I sacrifice? Nothing. Nothing. He kissed me once again, and now tears were in his eyes, and he said more softly, Esther, my dearest, after so many years there is a kind of parting in this too. I know that my mistake has caused you some distress. Forgive your old guardian in restoring him to his old place in your affections, and blot it out of your memory. Alan, take, my dear. He moved away under the green roof of leaves, stopping in the sunlight outside and turning cheerfully toward us, said, I shall be found about here somewhere. It's a west wind, little woman, due west. Let no one thank me any more, for I am going to revert to my bachelor habits. If anybody disregards this warning, I'll run away and never come back. What happiness was ours that day! What joy, what rest, what hope, what gratitude, what bliss! We were to be married before the month was out. But when we were to come and take possession of our own house was to depend on Richard and Ada. We all 3 went home together next day. As soon as we arrived in town, Alan went straight to see Richard and to carry our joyful news to him and my darling. Late as it was, I meant to go to her for a few minutes before laying down to sleep, but I went home with my guardian first to make his tea for him, and to occupy the old chair by his side, for I did not like to think of its being empty so soon. And that is the end of chapter 63.